There's a specific kind of tired that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. You're not crashing. You're not breaking down. You're just quietly exhausted. You wake up, do what you're supposed to do, scroll a bit, think about improving your life, maybe save a few videos, maybe write a to-do list, and then somehow the day is over. Nothing went wrong, but nothing really moved forward either. And the weird part is, you're not unmotivated in the lazy sense. You want things to change. You just don't have the energy to chase them loudly anymore. If that feels familiar, like you're stuck in this low-volume, low-energy phase, where you're not failing but you're also not progressing the way everyone online says you should, yeah, this video is for you. Because here's something most people don't talk about. Some of the people who rebuild their lives the fastest aren't the loud, motivated, disciplined ones. They're the quiet ones. Hi, my name is Alex. I spend way too much time thinking about why modern life feels exhausting, even when we're doing everything right. And if you're someone who feels mentally tired, overwhelmed, or stuck between wanting to improve and wanting to rest, you're in the right place. No pressure here. No big promises. If this helps you feel a little more understood, you can subscribe or like the video or share, not because you have to, but because it helps this channel reach people who need quieter conversations like this. Here's the thing. Most of us grew up with a very specific story about how change is supposed to happen. You get motivated. You decide to lock in. You push harder than before. You stay disciplined, and you don't stop. And if you fail, well, you just didn't want it badly enough. Honestly, this idea sounds good. It's clean. It's simple. But it completely falls apart once mental exhaustion enters the picture. Because motivation assumes you have excess energy to burn. And most people watching this don't. They're already running on a nervous system that's overstimulated, under-recovered, and constantly switching contexts. Notifications, expectations, comparison, internal pressure. According to the American Psychological Association, over 77% of young adults report stress levels that significantly affect their daily functioning. Not their productivity. Their functioning. That's not a motivation problem. That's an energy problem. Look, motivation works great when your life is stable. When you're sleeping okay. When your identity feels solid. When you're not constantly feeling behind. But when you're mentally tired, motivation actually makes things worse. Here's why. Motivation is loud. It demands attention. It asks for intensity. And intensity is expensive. Every time you hype yourself up, you're borrowing energy from a system that's already depleted. That's why motivated phases usually look like this. You feel inspired one night. You plan everything. You promise yourself, this time will be different. You go hard for a few days. And then you crash. Not because you're weak, but because your nervous system can't sustain that level of output. This is where it gets interesting. Quiet people don't rebuild faster because they're better. They rebuild faster because they stop trying to overpower exhaustion. Most people assume quiet means passive, unambitious, unmotivated, behind. But that's not what quiet rebuilding actually looks like. Quiet rebuilding isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing less, with less internal friction. Quiet people tend to stop announcing their plans. They stop comparing timelines. They stop trying to look productive. They stop chasing motivation spikes. And because of that, they stop triggering the stress response over and over again. Here's what most people don't realize. Progress isn't driven by intensity. It's driven by consistency under low stress. And quiet people naturally lower the stress. Let's talk psychology for a moment, but keep it simple. Your brain has two basic modes when it comes to change. Threat mode and motivation culture keeps you in threat mode. Deadlines, fear of falling behind, pressure to optimize, identity comparisons. Threat mode can create short bursts of action, but it also shuts down creativity, reflection, and long-term planning. Quiet people rebuild in safety mode. Not because life is easy, but because they stop adding unnecessary pressure on top of difficulty. And safety mode is where learning sticks. Neuroscience shows that habits form more easily when stress hormones like cortisol are lower. That means the calmer you are, the easier it is for small behaviors to become automatic. Quiet people don't rely on willpower. They rely on alignment. Most advice assumes a level of energy you don't have. Wake up earlier, push through resistance, stay consistent no matter what. Now you might be thinking, isn't that just discipline? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Discipline without recovery becomes self-punishment. And mentally tired people already punish themselves enough. The problem isn't that you don't know what to do. The problem is that your system is overloaded. So when advice tells you to add more habits, more routines, more effort, your brain quietly resists. Not because you're lazy, but because it's protecting you. Let's do some very simple math. You wake up with 100 units of mental energy. Now subtract notifications, background anxiety, comparison scrolling, decision fatigue, self-criticism. Before you even start improving your life, you're already down to maybe 40. Motivation-based advice asks you to spend 80. Quiet rebuilding asks a different question. How do we reduce the leak? That's why quiet people often make progress with fewer actions. They don't add more effort. They remove friction. Most people don't talk about this part. Guilt around rest is one of the biggest energy drains there is. Rest doesn't feel restful when you feel like you should be doing more. So even when you're not working, your mind is. Quiet people often rebuild faster because they make peace with rest earlier. They stop negotiating with themselves. They stop turning rest into a moral failure. And once guilt leaves the system, energy returns slowly, naturally. Another thing, motivated people often rebuild loudly because they need proof. Proof that they're changing. Proof that they're not stuck. Proof that their effort counts. Quiet people don't need that proof. They don't perform progress. They let it be invisible. And invisible progress compounds better because it isn't interrupted by doubt, validation seeking, or pressure to maintain an image. So what does quiet rebuilding actually look like? Honestly, it looks boring, and that's why it works. It looks like fewer goals, slower mornings, less content consumption, more pauses, smaller promises. This part is uncomfortable, but important. If your progress needs to look impressive to feel valid, it probably won't last. Quiet rebuilding is about making change survivable. Let's make this practical, gently. Not a checklist. Not a challenge, just a few small shifts. Reduce one source of noise. Not your whole life, just one. One app. One input. One comparison trigger. Pick one daily anchor, not a routine. An anchor. Something small you return to. A walk, a notebook, a quiet playlist. Stop tracking everything. Tracking can turn healing into performance. Lower the bar on good enough. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And let slowness be part of the process. Not a delay, part of it. Let's make this practical, gently. Not a checklist, not a challenge. Just a few small shifts. Reduce one source of noise. Not your whole life, just one. One app. One input. One comparison trigger. Pick one daily anchor. Not a routine, an anchor. Something small you return to. A walk, a notebook, a quiet playlist. Stop tracking everything. Tracking can turn healing into performance. Lower the bar on good enough. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And let slowness be part of the process. Not a delay, part of it. Here's the truth most people need to hear. If you're quieter than you used to be, if motivation feels fake, if rest feels necessary, you're not broken. You're recalibrating. Quiet people rebuild faster because they stop fighting where they are. They work with their energy instead of against it. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. You don't need to become louder, stricter, or more motivated to rebuild your life. You need to become more honest about what your system can handle right now. Slow progress that respects your energy will always outlast explosive motivation. If this helped you feel a little more grounded, consider subscribing. This channel exists for people rebuilding quietly, at their own pace, in their own way. You're not late. You're just doing it differently, and that's okay.